Welcome to our third episode of Interruption of the Han Dynasty by Wang Mang, Establishment of the Xin Dynasty. Let's begin our new episode. The empire stood on a knife's edge. By AD 20, China was no longer a unified land governed by a single mandate. It was a vast, fractured landscape where starving farmers, desperate rebels, loyalist generals, and overconfident ministers all believed they were fighting for the future of heaven's order. And at the center of the storm, still clinging to the throne he had crafted from ancient philosophy and unwavering certainty, sat Wang Mang. Inside the capital, the once glittering Xin court was beginning to dim. Officials who once praised the emperor's reforms now whispered about escape routes. Ministers who had sworn loyalty 100 times now sent secret messages to rebel leaders. Even the palace guards watched the gates with divided hearts, unsure whether they were protecting the emperor or keeping themselves trapped within his sinking vision. Wang Mang, however, saw all challenges as temporary disruptions, as if rebellion itself could be reasoned away by ritual and renamed by decree. He continued to host elaborate ceremonies, praying for divine intervention while issuing edicts that no longer reached anyone outside the capital. His power existed in the same way a painting exists, visible, preserved, and admired by some, but incapable of influencing the real world. The rebels, though, were very real. Out in the southern marshes, the Lulin, ragged, hungry, and hardened by survival, had transformed from starving peasants into a massive army. Their leaders were not noblemen, not scholars, not members of any elite clan, but men shaped by suffering. They moved through the countryside like a tide no commander could predict. Villagers joined them not from ideology, but from desperation and fury. They burned Xin grain stores, stormed county seats, and executed corrupt local officials. In the north, a different flame was rising. A young man named Lu Shu, quiet, intelligent, and unassuming, watched the chaos with the eyes of someone who understood the fragility of empires. He was a distant relative of the Han royal family, a descendant of the great Emperor Jing. Unlike others who claimed royal blood, Lu Shu made no loud proclamations. He studied, he listened, he waited. His older brother, Liu Yan, was bold and charismatic, favored by many Han loyalists. Together, they became the seeds of a movement that would soon reshape history. The fall of the Xin Dynasty accelerated the moment the red eyebrows emerged. These rebels, named the red pigment they painted across their foreheads, began as small groups of farmers struggling against famine in the Shandong region. But their movement grew rapidly. They believed in signs and omens, and they followed leaders who claimed mystical insight. Soon they formed one of the most powerful and unpredictable armies in all China. Their discipline was crude, their organization inconsistent, but their numbers, tens of thousands, were enough to shake the Xin Dynasty to its core. As rebellion spread like wildfire, the court became paralyzed. Wang Mang demanded absolute enforcement of his laws, but no one outside the palace listened. His armies were stretched thin and poorly supplied. Generals defected, soldiers deserted, and entire commanderies declared independence or allegiance to Han pretenders. The empire was no longer a single body, it was a field of shattered bones. Then in AD 22, the unthinkable happened. The Lulin rebels captured the imperial capital of Chang'an for the first time. They did not hold it for long, but their success sent shockwaves through the dynasty. The reality was undeniable. The Xin Dynasty was collapsing. In a desperate attempt to salvage order, the rebels chose a new emperor, not from among themselves, but from the Han royal bloodline. They declared Lu Xuan, a distant cousin of Lu Shu, the new emperor, calling him Zhengxi Emperor. For many across the empire, this announcement was the signal they had been waiting for. Han restoration was no longer a dream,
but a claim backed by armies. As messengers galloped across the provinces bearing the news, people rejoiced. Farmers who had abandoned faith in any government suddenly offered grain to rebel armies. Former Han generals emerged from hiding. Scholars abandoned the Xin calendar and began writing dates under the restored Han reign. Wang Mang's officials urged him to flee the capital. He refused. He believed that heaven would not permit the empire to fall into the hands of rebels and usurpers. He believed his own moral purity was enough to summon divine protection. He ordered the palace musicians to continue their rituals, the scribes to continue recording his reign without interruption, and the guards to prepare for a last stand. In the winter of AD 23, the decisive moment arrived. The combined rebel forces, Red Eyebrows, Lulin, and Han loyalists marched toward Chang'an in a massive, loosely coordinated wave. They came with crude weapons and stolen armor, but they came in numbers the Xin army could not hope to match. For every Xin soldier standing on the walls, 10 rebels advanced across the plains. The Battle of Kunyang had already shown that rebel armies could defeat Wang Mang's best-trained troops, but this time, it was not a battle, it was the end of an era. The rebels breached the city walls after ferocious street fighting. The capital dissolved into chaos. Fires raged. Loyalist and rebel forces clashed in alleyways filled with smoke and falling debris. The grandeur of the Xin palace, the jade carvings, the lacquered screens, and the gilded ceremonial vessels became obstacles in a battleground that had once symbolized order. In the center of the storm, Wang Mang stood inside the Weiyang Palace, clutching a ceremonial sword gifted to him years earlier by a scholar who believed he would lead China into a new age of moral restoration. Flames reflected across the polished blade. Outside the palace gates, rebel troops surged forward. Some accounts say Wang Mang died in combat, swinging his sword in defiance until he was overwhelmed. Others say he was dragged down by a mob and killed while still calling upon heaven to witness his righteousness. A few later historians suggest that ministers may have betrayed him to the rebels in exchange for their own survival. But all records, rebel, loyalist, and later Han, agree on one detail. Wang Mang did not flee. He died where he believed destiny had placed him. When the rebels stormed the palace and found his body, the Xin Dynasty effectively ended. The throne he had carved from fragments of ancient ideals collapsed in a swirl of dust, fire, and blood. The aftermath was brutal. The Red Eyebrows, lacking discipline and order, looted the capital mercilessly. Temples were desecrated, official archives destroyed, and entire neighborhoods burned. The Zhengxi emperor, placed on the throne, quickly discovered that rebels who could topple a dynasty often struggled to build one. The empire needed stability, not symbolism. Meanwhile, Lu Shu, calm, strategic, and far-sighted, continued gathering allies. He watched as chaos consumed the land and understood a truth few grasped. The Han restoration could not succeed under a puppet of rebellious warlords. The empire needed stability, not symbolism. He bided his time. Then, with careful diplomacy and precise military action, Lu Shu broke from the Red Eyebrows' influence. He defeated rival claimants, reorganized loyalist forces, and eventually moved into the heartland. In AD 25, 2 years after Wang Mang's fall, Lu Shu proclaimed himself emperor, founding the Eastern Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty, interrupted but not destroyed, had returned. Lu Shu, now Emperor Guangru, would go on to restore stability, rebuild the bureaucracy, and mend the wounds inflicted during the Xin interregnum. His reign would become a symbol of resilience, proving that even after one of the greatest political upheavals in Chinese history, the mandate of heaven could return to those who ruled with balance, patience, and wisdom. Wang Mang, meanwhile, became a figure debated for centuries. Was he a visionary reformer, crushed by circumstances beyond his control? A tyrant blinded by his own ambition? A scholar who tried to force ancient ideals onto a world that had long since changed? Or simply a man caught between history's shifting tides? The answer depends on who tells the story. But one truth remains constant. His rise and fall reshaped Chinese history, testing the mandate of heaven in a way few rulers ever dared to do. And from the ashes of his failed experiment, the Han Dynasty emerged stronger, ready to define Chinese civilization for centuries to come. Dear viewers,